my undergraduate days, yes. During my undergraduate days, well, it was not so much. I will not say that it was very high. I think there were people who were like a lot more into research than me. I can tell you that during my semester break after my second year, I did some project in NIT Durgapur itself, and also I did a project in industry. So industry was in like I went to a power, because I was in electrical engineering. I went to a power grid station, and I had an internship there for a month. I came back to Durgapur and I also did some research with voice recognition using LabVIEW. So that was probably my first project on research ever. That one in NIT Durgapur. So that was the beginning. Then every semester break I did something. The next one I went to IIT Madras. I did some research work there. But it was not like that I really knew that this is my thing. I mean, I will be lying if I tell you that, oh, I knew it. I didn't know it. I was going because I was exploring. I wanted to explore new things. I went to industry for internship. I went to universities, institutes for research work. Just try to find out. I also did some project in IC, what is it called? CMRI, right?
CMRI.
Yes, CMRI. So I also did some project there, and all of them, these are on different topics. In CMRI, we were working on an autonomous robot for mine detection. Then in NIT Durgapur, I did a project on LabVIEW used for voice recognition. Then IIT Madras, I did work on some high voltage insulator materials and nanocomposite insulator materials. And then again in final year, I did my own, the one that you need to do for your own credit points, right? The 6-month project that I did in NIT Durgapur again, but this was on acoustic detection of or prevention of breakdown in transformer oil. So these were like few things I explored, like from robotics to high voltage materials and everything. So I was exploring a lot of things. I didn't know what which took me where. But yes, while doing it, I realized that I do like research. That was a learning from there, that I do like research. But it was not like I was too much into research. There were people who were like more into research compared to me. I was somewhere in the middle of the scale. When I said I was not, I was exploring in my undergrad days, it is true that when I was in my final year, I felt that I should be going for higher studies. But again, I was not like convinced inside me. Okay, so I did start preparing for GRE at that time. But frankly, what happens is when you are in a final year, you get placed. You just dump everything and just enjoy life. That's true, right? I don't know if that is for you, but that was for me, right? I left everything and I dumped everything and I started enjoying life. And when that happened, then this research thing was forgotten for few years. It was only when I went into my job, I was working with IOCL, then somewhere I realized that I think my niche or my, I belong there. That was when this whole thing evolved. And when I was working in IOCL, I realized that probably I'll have a better life or I'll be doing a better job at research than doing here. That's when I decided to make the move and move to research. So that is where the final, the conviction came. There was like, it was simmering. The idea was simmering in my mind for a long time at a low heat, but finally it boiled when I was working for IOCL. So when I was working for IOCL, I was doing very little of, let's say, engineering or science work. It was mostly at a managerial level work. Well, I did enjoy my time there. I mean, I would be lying if I say anything otherwise. I mean, I really enjoyed my time there. It was great to work with them, the environment and the culture and people there. But somewhere deep down, I felt that I was not using my brain enough. I was not using, I was not doing what I like. I mean, see, I am a curious person by nature. Okay, I mean, I love reading. So because I'm curious, I like to know things. That is not something I was doing in IOCL. I was not really learning new things. But probably for the first year, I learned few things new, which is a little about the oil industry, something about marketing, something about management, something about interpersonal skills. I learned those things. But beyond the point, it got saturated and mundane, and I was not learning anything new. Probably somewhere after my 1.5 year in IOCL, I started realizing I'm not learning anything new. I'm not growing as a person. So that is when I realized that no, this is not going anywhere. I need to develop as a person, and because I am someone who is curious, I need to be in a field where I can learn and new things every day, or at least regularly update myself. That's what kind of inspired me or motivated me to move away from that job into research. And of course, I did have a very, I did think about it. Like I objectively thought about it. Is it because I'm in IOCL, I'm not learning anything? Will it be different, for example, if I go to a tech company somewhere, let's say within the electrical domain, maybe if I move to Schneider, if I move to Schlumberger or NTPC or whatever, or Power Grid, will I have anything different? I was thinking about it and did talk to my friends at that point. But I realized that everywhere you go, it is going to be the same. You will not learn new things. You will not explore new things. You will just follow established things. So most of the jobs at some point are like more or less managerial jobs. There is a little like a varying proportion of technical part to it, but it is mostly overrun by managerial tasks. So that's when I decided, no, that's where I want to be. I want to be in research. That was kind of the final nail in the coffin. It was building up for some time. So yes, there is no one size fits all solution here. Okay, so I cannot have one suggestion for everyone. All I will say is every individual is different. You will have your own calling when you have it. I should say, think about what you're doing, or let's say plan for next 2 years, 3 years. Try to plan at your best, and then see where it takes you. But there is no single solution. For example, some people used to tell me at that time that once you are into industry, once you are into a company, you can never move out to research. It's not possible. Some people did tell me that. But then this is not true. I am in research. I mean, I am here, right? So it is not like that exactly, that if you are once into industry or a company, then you really cannot come back. I agree it is a bit difficult, because when I went back to IOCL, I told you that I was doing mostly a managerial job. So when I tried to come back, I was at a disadvantage, okay? Because firstly, I didn't have a published publication. Sorry, at any level, I did not have a publication. So because I did not have a publication, of course, it gives me a disadvantage. But I should also put here that having a publication is not really very important. It's not so important. I mean, it is something that you can have. It is good to have it. But if you don't have it, it really doesn't matter. Yeah. So it is good if you have publication, first thing. Second, if you are really clear that you want to go for research, at this point, if you think so, then I will say that put your full energy in research work. Try to get published. If you are convinced at this moment. If you are not convinced at this moment, that's also fine. Then do what you think suits you best at this moment. Later, if you find that is not suiting you, you can always move out of it to something else. Okay. And I think your second question was that, like, what is the kind of career or job we should be looking for when we move out of or after undergrad? Okay. So if you are applying for, let's say, a research career, like a master's or a PhD somewhere, then of course your past research career will help you. Your past research experiences, internships, projects will help you. Undoubtedly, okay. But again, as I mentioned, that is not a very important criteria. I think more weightage comes from your SOP, okay. That is, I think, more important. Then I would say your GRE, TOEFL scores. And then somewhere it's advantage to have papers. or publications or research experiences. Even if you don't have publication, it is good to have a research experience. Okay. But again, for example, if you're going for an MBA, so for that, industry experience will of course help. And not only industry experience, I mean, for an MBA, even your experience with an organization like NSS, for example, right? Even that helps when you're pursuing your MBA, when you apply to a college, because what all of this shows, all these experiences show is that you are capable of doing something. You're capable of working in an organization, you are capable of working with a goal. So this is what actually your undergrad should teach you. I mean, and frankly, you know, whatever you learn in undergrad, probably you will never use even 10% of it in your career, ever. Okay. So it is good to learn it because that opens up your brain learns to think. But what is more important is you to develop as a person. Once you develop as a person, I think you will find your own way everywhere. Don't worry about it. So don't just think that, oh, just because I did not do research there, I can never go for a research career. No, that doesn't work like that. Right. Well, I sometimes like to say that I resumed my student life when I went to NUS again. It was extension of my undergrad days. So I really had a very good time there. And personally, with friends and the whole campus life, I really enjoyed it. Apart from that, it really helped me grow as a person in like a lot of spheres. You know, my whole understanding of the world, whole understanding of science, research, everything evolved, and it evolved for better. So it was a very holistic experience. And if you talk about the educational experience there, then I'll tell you that a major change from what my undergrad experience was that there was, because I was doing full-time research right there, so it was a whole different thing where I was not really into, you know, mugging up stuff before the exam, 14 days before the exam, and then, you know, going on to the exam hall. Rather, I was thinking and I was working and I was developing ideas the whole time. So my learning was from doing it and doing it full time, rather than just, you know, just studying 14 days in a semester. And, you know, it's a whole different thing where I was exploring and learning and creating things all the time. So that way it was a really very great learning experience at NUS. I mean, NUS is I would really suggest people to go there and you know, for masters or PhD. Even some people, I don't know if there is a program still at NIT Durgapur, but some people still go for internships there. At some point when I was in NIT Durgapur, I know that students went to NUS for internships, and some of them actually went on to join NUS as a PhD or master student later. So I would say, if you really want to find it out, you can just go for internships and experience it for yourself. I think it's a better way of, you know, because I can say 1,000 things, but there's a personal experience. You can go and experience yourself, and then you can find it out if you can do that. If you cannot do that, I would really recommend NUS as a institute for higher studies. It's a really good institute, good academically, good also from a personal sphere, like, you know, growing as a person, and it will really give you a holistic experience about education and learning. Right. Then let me first tell you why I chose to not pursue masters, okay? Because that probably will throw more light onto the advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
So I told you that when I was in IOCL, I was thinking about considering seriously to move into research. And of course, I had two options. I could go into apply for masters, and I could also apply for PhD. Some of the universities do let you in directly for PhD, mostly in US and also some in Asia. But in Europe, it is mostly a no-no. There are very few universities in Europe which allow you to directly come for PhD. But mostly in America and in some universities in Asia and Australia, you can do it, right? So now I considered the pros and cons, and I was like, because I want to go for research. Okay, I want to work in research. So for me, research is probably going to be a long time thing. So it made more sense for me to go for a PhD directly, right? On the other hand, most people take masters because they want to move to a country out of India as a student and then work there, right? So I think if you're looking for that, like where you really want to go to industry and work in an industry in a different country, I think the master's route makes more sense for you. But if you really want to be in research, I would say you can directly go for PhD. I mean, I don't see a problem there. But again, it is up to you. It is your choice. Now coming to advantage and disadvantage, let me count them. When I was deciding, the points were this: very primary motivation. If I go for masters, I'll have to take a huge loan. Okay. And while working in IOCL, I had just paid my loan for my bachelor, like the undergrad one. So now I have to, and that was a very small amount compared to what I would have to take if I want to go for a master's, for example, in the US. And that would be a huge amount, right? And I would have to spend a lot of years paying that off, correct? And on the other hand, if I go for a PhD, I would get support in the form of, let's say, subsidies in the form of PAs, like graduate assistants, teaching assistants, research assistants, and so many other things that can be done, right? And you get some support to survive there. So for me, that's why it was very clear that first, I want to be in research for a longer time, and second, I don't want to take that amount of loan, right? These were the two primary motivations that made me think that I think PhD is better for me, directly going to PhD. Now, when I directly went into PhD, were there challenges for me? Yes, there were challenges. Okay. Because I had not taken masters, that basically meant that I have to take more courses during my PhD, right? Apart from my research, I need to take more courses. But I think it is quite manageable. You can do it. I mean, I have done it. I know numerous people who have done it, who are still doing it. So I think it's totally manageable. So I think you need to ask yourself, if you what is your primary goal? If your primary goal is to go into research, then you go for PhD directly. If your primary goal is to go into a foreign country and work there into whatever field you are looking for, then I would say you take the master's route, because then you get done with the studies in 1.5 years, 2 years, and then you can work and pay off your loan, right? But depends on what you are aiming at. Let's say you are planning in the long term, and then I would say you take your decision. But I think both of them are equally good in their own ways. Depends on what suits you. Okay. So again, there is again nothing one size fits all here as well. Many of my friends who finished their PhD with me or before me, after me, many of them are working in different fields today. Some of them are in industry, some of them are in a postdoctoral position like me. Some of them are in a postdoctoral position in a university. I am not working in a university at this moment, although I am doing my postdoctoral studies or pursuing postdoctoral studies, but I'm not in a university. I'm in a research institute. So again, these are different kind of research direction, different kind of research environment in a university and a research institute. So again, one needs to decide what you would like to do. For example, some people after their research in the PhD, they realize that, okay, I don't want to keep learning and doing new stuff every day, because it's not easy to do new stuff every day. To probe something, to do research is not easy. It's difficult, right? And of course, no job is easy. Every job has its own challenges. But here you need to think something that no one has ever known. You cannot just Google up and find it, because you are the one who is finding it. You are the one who is pursuing to learn something which people can learn from you later, right? You publish a paper and then they come to know about it. So it is very challenging because there is no one else to help you. Because always you are on your own, right? So some people at some point, I think then they realize that no, I think we don't want to be doing this whole our life. So we probably move into industry where it is very limited amount of research, where you do research but in a very incremental way. Like for example, today you would not like leap jump from one research technology to the other in industry. Industry will always wait for the universities to come up with the preliminary technology, and then industry would take it and fine tune it to make it a mass scale producible material or technology, right? So that is what industry does. The industry doesn't make leap changes, industry makes small fine changes. So if you think that is what you are looking for, that is what you are made for, then that is the place you go to industry. On the other hand, if you feel that, oh, I'm a person who wants to really explore the challenges, find something very new, and research is very frustrating. I mean, you can spend years finding nothing. Okay, so if you are up for it, then research is for you. I mean, university-based research or research institute-based research. But if you think that no, I am happy making small changes where I can make take technologies from the university and make it industrially compatible, then industry is for you. So you have to again ask yourself what suits you. So let me first begin with what I did in my PhD. Probably that will then lead to this. So my PhD is I was working on storage devices, memory storage devices, and I was working with magnetic memory storage devices. Okay, not solid state, magnetic, right? So which is mostly the hard disk drives that you are using, all of us are using in our computers. My research in PhD was on improving the storage capacity and making it a better product, let's say. So exploring new technologies for it. That is what I did in my PhD. And when I move on to my postdoc here, I am still working on magnetic storage and processing. But the current technology that we use, the RAMs that we use, for example, or the processors that we use are all solid state, right? They're all silicon-based technology, right? So what many research institutes and universities are looking at is alternate forms of technology. So for example, the most you hear about is, for example, quantum computing we hear and all those things, right? So they are like really the edge, like where we almost are taking baby steps, okay? But in the middle, there is this magnetic processing, or which is called the MRAM and such stuff, magnetic random access memories. So it's a RAM with a magnetic, okay? It's a magnetic RAM. And there are different technologies which are used or not used, which are researched to be used as MRAMs to replace the RAMs, okay? So that's what my research at this moment is based on. But again, I'm talking from a very broad perspective, because my research is at a very miniature, at the nanometer scale level. So my research is based on or focuses on developing those material technologies which can later be led to form MRAM. Okay, but MRAM is the final product. So I hope that kind of gives you an idea about my research. So when we are in engineering or in any technology in India, now India has this huge problem of lacking interdisciplinary learning. We are very constricted in, very tunnel visioned in what we are learning. In fact, we have created tunnels such that we have electrical engineering and we have electronics engineering and then we have computer engineering, and apart from that we also have IT, right? I mean, why are we creating these huge, these small islands? They're all the same, right? So all of us need to understand, you, your viewers, and all my fellow engineers, researchers, all of us need to understand that we have to work in an interdisciplinary environment once we go out of our undergrad. Okay, so don't really think that whatever, as I mentioned, whatever you're learning probably will use only 10% of it or less than that in the whole life. Okay, in your whole life. So be open to learn new things, because that's what we'll probably be using in the future. So asking, as you asked, was how did I come up with it or how did I cope up with it? Yes, when I went for higher studies, I realized that what I was lacking. So of course, the courses that I took there did help me. It was really difficult because first thing, I did not have a materials background. That is true. Okay, and used to be a module taken by Pathik Kumbhakar sir. I don't know if he takes it yet, for electrical engineers in NIT Durgapur, and that was focused on the kind of applied level physics of semiconductor devices, MOSFET junctions and everything. So that was the only module which taught me something which nearly was usable for me in the future. Okay, and that is what I could build on. So that was the one module that was remotely associated to what I was working on in my research. I took the learning from there. Of course, I remembered some things from there, and then I took modules in NUS which were more relevant to my research, and from there on I learned more into the applied physics and the more about the material engineering or material science part of it. So all of it was really new, but as I mentioned before, our training as an engineer is not to be filled with all the knowledge required for our life. It is about to make us capable of learning. So if you are trained well in your engineering, I think you will be very quick and very good at absorbing things in the future when you are learning new stuff, like be it material science, be it material engineering, or be it applied physics. But all of you should remember that interdisciplinary is the word. Everything today is interdisciplinary. So don't keep yourself limited to any one topic. Learn as much as you can, because everything will be handy at some point of your life. Good. In fact, I think I shared it with my batchmates when we have a WhatsApp group about it. So I shared with my batchmates there, and that is what I'm talking about, like mechanical engineers, electronics engineers, computer engineers, all of you have to come together to build something. So it's good to know others' domains. So try to collaborate even in your undergrad days. Try to collaborate with other departments as much as you can. I may add one more thing here. This is not something you can do, but probably this can be brought up to your the institute administration at some point, that you can be like, for example, I remember that when I used to have those elective subjects, I was allowed to take electives. Only very few electives were available to me to be taken. Okay, for example, I had this elective option at some point, I think in my 7th or 8th semester, of taking either advanced control system, which was an electrical engineering subject, or something about power budgeting and designing. And the other one was that was available was object-oriented, not object-oriented, sorry, VLSI. VLSI taught by IT department. Okay. Now, I don't know. I mean, what is going on here? First thing is we should have more options. First thing, okay. I mean, electrical engineers should be able to go and see what is happening in biotechnology. Why not? I mean, electronics engineers are today employed in the biotechnology industry, right? It is not only biotechnology who have a biotechnology background are employed in biotechnology companies. Not like that. So we should have interdisciplinary options to take interdisciplinary subjects. First thing, and second is that I think this is again not something you can do, but this whole silos about having IT and then electronics and electrical doesn't really help, because IT was teaching VLSI. I mean, IT is not an expert in VLSI. If I really think about it, I mean, I would say electronic engineering probably would be a better department to teach VLSI or something like that. I mean, my personal idea. So I think at the administration level, those things have to come together, and students need to be provided more opportunity to venture into other subjects, so that they have a more holistic experience and learning during the undergrad days. So maybe you can bring this up. I don't know if there is a channel of communication. You can bring this up. Okay, so when we started, we really did not have a very clear vision. I'll be honest with you with that. What we basically thought was that, as I mentioned before we started this interview, I mentioned to you that we felt that there was a lack of, let's say, a dimension to the campus experience that we have through different clubs, because either there was this whole thing about robotics, or there was this literary fest or literature LC or literary circle, and you had those things, but there was nothing about more professional side of it, like after an engineer, the career, be it a researcher career, be it an industry career, something with the career. There was this one club, I think they used to go send for, I forgot the name, if you can remind me. I think the most mechanical engineering and metallurgy engineering students used to run this, and it was about internships in different places. I just can't remember the name of the organization, but there was one organization which was student body which was running with mechanical and metallurgy students, and they were organizing these internships and everything, coordinating internships and experiences with, for example, the steel plants and the turbine plants and everything, right? And fortunately, Durgapur is in a belt where there is a lot of it. So it's very, very nice that way, actually. But we felt that from the electrical perspective or the electronics perspective or the computer perspective, we don't have that kind of a professional linking body which links the profession and the undergrad experience or something. So that was kind of the raw idea. We thought that we need to fill this gap. So we thought that IEEE student branch would be a better way of doing it, because then we can connect with IEEE, we can connect with IEEE student chapters all across India, and that kind of was a broader vision, that we encourage students to join more in this professional stream. So that was how we began. But again, exactly when we started, we also had to get people to come in to participate with us, to know about us, and that's why we also went into all the other major fests in the institute, where we had our own small events, let's say kiosk, desks and events, so that we can create more awareness among people. Fortunately, the first year we had a lot of membership coming in, a lot of people joined. There was, I would also be honest to say that there were a lot of people who came in but had no idea what they're doing. But they probably thought it is a cool thing to do. So they came in, but some of them, of course, had an idea, but some of them didn't. So eventually down the line, I think the, things fell in place. People who were really interested with it, they were there. And if you go back and look at the events that we did, I mean, we got speakers from CERN, okay? We got speakers from Saha Institute of Nuclear Physics. We got speakers from IIT Kharagpur and industry people, and coming in giving talks. That is not something that was done in NIT Durgapur ever. I mean, people would bring in stars like Shan or Zubeen Garg or Pritam, but no one would bring these stars in the academic or the professional world. And these people needed to come there. I mean, I'm not saying that is not important, but this is also important. This was missing. Our vision was to bring this. And then, of course, Manish was there, who had this idea about starting a conference there. And I don't know if you know about Manish Goyal. Manish Goyal was very instrumental in IEEE then. I don't remember the post now, but I think he was the chairman at that point. I don't remember. But yes, he had this thing that we should also have a conference. So we went on to organize this international conference on emerging trends. If I'm not wrong, that was the name, ICET, and that also really did well. And we thought that we had nurtured a good breed of students in the following years who would take this forward. And they were all involved in it. I mean, I have some photos, probably I can share those folders with you guys, and you can see what we did. And there were members who were there, and we had really breathed them well. And at least I would believe that we all did our best with help and guidance from our faculty advisors there. But unfortunately, as you mentioned, that somewhere it got lost, that vision got lost. But that was the vision we started with. And of course, then there are so many other things that you can bring with, as you were saying, you were doing a congress and everything. So that was the kind of thing, to have a more academic and industry interaction with the students, which was missing on the campus. So hats off to you guys that you started it and you are doing it. I'm really happy and glad you are doing it. And I think we all need it at some point. Being an IEEE member is not the important thing. And okay, I'm just being honest here. It is not really important that you're being an IEEE member. But if you have an IEEE student branch there, that will kind of give you the platform where you can use to connect to different people. Okay. And today you people contacted me over LinkedIn, right? So anyone can contact anyone over LinkedIn today, right? So you don't need the IEEE network for that. But the IEEE provides you the structure and the resources with which you can have this kind of gatherings, these platforms, these conferences, congresses, talks, This is something that we need. And this is something I think where the IEEE student branch can come in and cater to students in NIT Durgapur. I hope I have answered your question. I mean, that's what comes to my mind at this point. So, I will say again, being very honest here, the experience with NIT Durgapur was very different. That was our IEEE student branch in NIT Durgapur was very different from the graduate student council experience there. There are pros and cons on both sides. So, on the NIT Durgapur side, IEEE student branch side, I would say that we had a lot of freedom. We where it was completely up to us to come up with events, to come up with everything, to arrange for it, and it was a whole mostly student-driven program or work, right? The faculty advisors did their best in guiding us, but of course, like we were given the free hand to come up with it, to execute it right from the smallest details. Everything was done by us, right? So that was kind of a very learning experience for me, because I learned a lot of things. How, for example, like how to plan an event, how to organize it, how to plan the details about it so that you don't have last minute hiccup, how to deal with these huge speakers who are like experts in their own ways, big people, like they are really stars in their own fields. They're coming in to talk. I mean, you have to really make sure that they are comfortable, they are or let's say they are being told what exactly to say for not exactly to say, but what exactly the audience would benefit from, and those kind of things, like you have to think about it, the perspective and everything. So and then bringing up sponsorships, running this organization and everything, so coordinating with student chapters. So this all gave a really new great experience for me. It's a huge plethora of experiences that I gained. Okay, I had failures, I learned, I did a very stupid thing. Let me tell you that I sent out an email to, and this is my admission here, probably you will be laughing at me, but, I sent out an email to, in my, I think, second year, for sponsorship to different people, and I did not BCC them. Right? So all were seeing, everyone knew who else was approached, okay? Everyone knew. I mean, I think about it now and I know how stupid that was, but I was stupid. I did it. But then I knew that never to do it again. Right? So I learned a lot of things there. Made mistakes, but learned a lot of things. When I went to NUS and I was a part of the graduate student council there, okay, the disadvantage is that there you really don't get to play so much with the formats, you don't really have that liberty to do a lot of things that you want, you cannot come up with crazy ideas or crazy events. I did not have the experience there, like that kind of huge experience that I had with IEEE student branch. Okay, but on the other side, the advantage there was that they had more structure there. For example, the institute had a framework where I can work with. Okay, they had a constitution, for example. For IEEE student branch, I had to build it. I don't know if it exists or not today, but we did have something at that point. Then for graduate student council, we had that. Like, okay, we had it there, and then we would like get support in monetarily and everything. We can write a note, and the department would have enough money to fund us. Okay, at least partially or something. So those things were much better there, the structure and the monetary issues and everything, but it did not have the liberty or the kind of freedom that I could have in IEEE student branch in NIT Durgapur. So this is kind of broadly, I would say, the two different experiences. But of course, I mean, those both experiences are very good experiences. Okay, there we organized a symposium. I don't know if it is there on my LinkedIn, but there we organized a symposium with a lot of speakers over a few days, and we did it for 2 years. So We also had bowling events and all those kind of activities, barbecues. We did a lot of activities. But again, I would say that IEEE student branch was more free. I had a lot of freedom. There was nothing established. Everything was for the first time. So it still is a more enriching experience for me, because I had more challenges, I had more new things to do, and everything we were doing was like fine. We were paving the path. There was no path to be followed, right? That is what makes the NIT Durgapur experience or IEEE student branch experience more exciting for me.
Definitely, thank you so much for telling us this experiences. I would like to ask you one thing. Like this is like a bit off topic from the interview. Like I have been into some research projects and various stuff. So I was just asking you, like, when you go into a research topic, like the first, like, do you go into it like thinking of publishing a paper, or do you go into it first to explore, and then how the depending on how the work goes, you go into publishing the paper? Like, I'm asking this because like I have interacted with a few people and I have had like two different sides to it. Like some people, even before if the project has even started, it's like, let's publish a paper and go into the direction of publishing a paper. Or like you and others have like told me, like let's start the research and then depending on the results we can always publish a paper on that.
Yes. Okay. So again, it is the question is basically what is the motivation? Okay. So if you're you have to first think about logically speaking, the paper of course comes after the research. Logically, right?
Yeah.
But I know what you're talking about. That some people, they would do is they would envision first that okay, if I do this, I get to write this on the paper. Okay, this is like a very, let's say, object oriented. Okay, this is very focused. So this is one way of doing it. So I won't say that this is the wrong way, but my preference would be to first define a research problem. The first step, according to me, is to define the research problem. See what is the problem. Okay. The second step is to think about, not think. The second step is to study what all has been done in that, what to solve it. Okay, and see that what still remains. I mean, why still the problem exists, right? Because people may have tried to do something to solve it, but they could not solve it. But first, you should know what they tried, so that you don't try the same thing. Okay. That's the second thing. So this is called the literature study or review. Okay. The third step would be to now think about a solution that you think can potentially solve it. Okay, that will be the third step. The fourth step is to design an experiment, because you have an idea now, but you need to design an experiment to prove that hypothesis, right, or test that hypothesis. So the fourth step or the fifth step is rather to test the hypothesis. Okay. Once you have tested the hypothesis, and remember, the hypothesis should be tested in the minimum possible resources. Like, you should not start with a huge bunch of everything and then believing that your hypothesis works, because your hypothesis may not work. It's just a hypothesis. So do a small test, design small experiments to see if you can really see some encouraging results out of it. Seeing that maybe it will solve it. Some positive things. If you see something positive, then you design a broader experiment with a more enhanced setup and more enhanced resources, and then you go in with the full details of it. Do a very systematic detailed study, and then you think about publication, right, or patenting, whichever needs to be done. Because we don't talk about patents, but patent is also very important. If it is a new technology, you patent it. But remember, patent can also be, ideally, patent can be of an idea. Okay, I mean, if you really Google up the patents that are there, let's say just Google 10 crazy patents, you will see that people have patented very stupid and crazy ideas, right? And they can be done without giving any proof for it. But in today's world, mostly you would not get a patent just by giving an idea. You would need to show some preliminary result to get a patent, right? So think about patents as well, not only paper. But I think this is the proper approach to go for research. Okay? Some people would take the shortcut, do the reverse engineering and think, oh, I can write a paper. What can I do to write a paper? I just need to do this, and that's it. I have a paper. It might be helpful in a short term, but you will not get a very good publication. That I can guarantee. This kind of technique will work to get you a publication. You can get a publication. Very short time maybe. But you will not get a good research output. You will not have done a very fulfilling research job. Here I would just like to say that I don't know where you're getting this information from, but when I was in undergrad, I had few of my fellow students, undergrad students, who were doing some research work with some people. And an undergrad is everyone joins some professor to do something, right? Not everyone, but many people, right? So some of them were following that way, where they were doing step by step, as I am telling you, should be the way. But some of them, what they did was, and of course I will not name the professor, but this is hearsay, so I should not name any professor. But the professor did tell them that, okay, see, I have seen this paper which has come out there. We just change, and it was a simulation paper, and they were like, oh, okay, we change these parameters here, and we can explore this part of it, and we can publish another paper. Okay, now that is not the way to do it. That is definitely not the way to do it. It will give you small gains. Okay, it will definitely give you small gains. Maybe it will give you a paper very quickly. Yes, but people who you will be applying to for your future studies, they are not stupid. I mean, they know. They see your paper and they know what kind of work you have done, right? So then the question basically comes is about your research aptitude, your research, the way you approach research. Okay, so that is very important. It will seem that, oh, you are someone who just wants to take a shortcut. You are not really interested in research. So in your SOP you will be writing, oh, I am very interested in research. But what your paper will be showing is completely the opposite. So you should know that the recruiters in these institutes and universities are very smart. They see this every day, so they can see through. They will not get fooled. So I would say it is better to do a more systematic research than going for this short gain. It is okay if you don't have a publication, but you should have learned from that research experience. I think that is more important.